Welcome to the Ringer NFL show. Sheil Kapadia here with Diante Lee and Steven Ruiz. Good to have you watching on FanDuel TV or listening on Spotify. Week 12, a wild Week 12. New narratives forming, maybe. Wild endings. Who knows? Are some teams out? Are some teams in? We are going to discuss it all. We're just going to get right into it as we do at the start of the show and start with our lessons, gentlemen. And I'm going to start us off because we just finished watching the Eagles take it to the Los Angeles Rams, and we're going to get into a lot of stuff about the playoff landscape and who fits where. I think the Eagles, my first lesson is the Eagles are the biggest threat to the Lions in the NFC. After watching that game, we've watched this team all season long. The first 5 weeks, it's like, is Nick Sirianni going to make it to Thanksgiving? They have a nice win over the Bengals. And now you look at them and what they're able to do on the lines of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. I mean, their offensive line dominated in this game, and their defensive line, their pass rush, which was something that I had concerns about, over much of the season, has really come on strong the last couple of weeks here. And then, of course, how did I not start with this guy? Saquon Barkley in this game. 30 touches for 302 yards. Diante, I've said it before, I have been running back pilled this season. I was the little nerd saying, you don't need to pay running backs. Don't take running backs in the first round. And now here I am on the Ringers Philly special and the Ringer NFL show, getting to watch this guy every week. And you add him to the mix. I don't know. Am I crazy? Do you agree with me? Eagles are the biggest threat to the Lions, who I think are still the favorites in the NFC.
I would say that they are. I would say the Green Bay is probably not far off, but coming off of this Sunday night game, I think it's hard to make much of an argument that the Eagles should not be considered as maybe as a number 2 team in the NFC right now. And a lot of that is because of Saquon Barkley. And to your point, Sheil, it's not that I was ever on the side of running backs don't matter. Obviously I'm probably the one guy on the show who is most staunch in the run the ball, play good defense. That still works as a winning formula in the league. But watching Saquon Barkley, and the thing that differentiates him from so many of his peers are all the little things he can do to create space. You'll see him run up the back of a lineman, spin out, and now what would have been a 2.5-yard gain is an 8-yard gain, right? And then you get to see, and I think that this week, the Commanders game, both were great examples of how much he wears on you because every play can pop for an explosive. You just see linebackers having to overcommit, and now they're running counter, and he gets underneath for a 10 to 15-yard gain. If you try to play more downhill, because he was able to get some yardage in between the tackles early in the game, you get that third quarter touchdown run where he hits the edge and there's nobody there. And he still has that gear where if he gets to top speed, there's not much that anybody can do with them, linebacker or DB. And that just alleviates so much stress on this offense. And I think that what we're seeing over the last couple of weeks is just how little they have to ask of Jalen Hurts, which is a gift, I think, for this team when you talk about their ability to contend in the NFC going forward.
Yeah, and that makes his job just so much easier. Jalen Hurts' job it makes it so much easier, but I think he's playing really well. Like in that environment, it looks like 2022 Jalen Hurts again, where he's not overthinking things. I mean, you still saw a couple plays where he's holding onto the ball for a long time. He's sitting back there in the pocket. He has enough time to make dinner back there. But usually, or at least lately, those plays have been turning into explosive gains and big plays that move the chains. At the beginning of the year, that wasn't the case. But I think Kellen Moore has found the right formula for this offense. It starts obviously with Saquon Barkley and being able to guarantee basically 4 or 5 yards every first down, with the potential of going for 70 yards anytime you hand hit the ball, and building a simple passing game around that threat, and also around the threat of having A.J. Brown on the outside. Devontae Smith wasn't in this game, and you hardly noticed it because of those 2 pillars of the offense so far this season.
Yeah, Saquon Barkley has 5 runs of 50-plus yards in 11 games. That's more than any player had last season. And again, he's played 11 games. Just that the threat, it's not even, explosives on the ground are what considered like 12 yards, 14 yards, right, depending on who you talk to in the NFL. These are 50-yard runs. And your point is so apt, Diante. It's like, you just keep going. It is the old body blows thing. And then it's only a matter of time with that offensive line where he gets the space and all of a sudden he breaks one there. And I think you're right, Ruiz. I thought this was one of Hurts's better games of the season. It's like little things like they brought a blitz and he knew where to go and he hits AJ Brown on a little inbreaker and it turns into an explosive play. But they're one of the most run heavy teams in the NFL. So it's not like he's got to, carry them on his back. He's got to not turn the football over. He's got to scramble with his legs, which we saw him do tonight, and pick up first downs on third down, and then be accurate with the ball and get the ball in the hands of AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. So this season has taken a turn. Now, let me ask you this. If we agree and the betting markets and FanDuel and everyone would say the Lions are the favorites in the NFC, how wide do we think the gap is between a team like the Lions and the Eagles? Does it come down to home field advantage? Is it more? No, I think the Lions are probably a tier above, because right now the Eagles are one game behind the Lions. The Lions have a harder remaining schedule. And Diante, this is one of the biggest stories in the conference really the rest of the way, is which of these teams is not going to have that weird slip up and lose ground for home field advantage.
I think that what we've seen the last few weeks in Philadelphia probably suggests that their ceiling is right about where it needs to be able to go toe-to-toe with Detroit. I don't know if I would say that there's a slim margin or a slim difference between the two, because I do think that maybe Detroit's median game, their B plus game, I think is better than what Philadelphia's B plus game has been this year. We've seen it at different points. Obviously the Giants game, which they controlled from beginning to end earlier this year, was a mess for Jalen Hurts in the pocket. He had a lot of struggles pushing the ball downfield. We've seen that kind of run hot and cold. But I think that what we're seeing over the last few weeks is, because of the threat of the explosive run game, I think kind of augmenting what they want to do on offense, that allows them, I think, to be able to look at anybody across the field and play with them, toe to toe. And with some of the injuries and how banged up Detroit has been defensively, I think that if those two teams met, Philadelphia should not necessarily feel fearful of anything other than, Jared Goff and Ben Johnson just having a heater and you not having an answer. I think that this offense can move the ball against just about anybody in the league right now.
But I do think, I think any of the question marks you have about Detroit to also apply to Philadelphia.
Yes,
they are also a team that's built around the run game. They're also a run heavy team. I know Jared Goff puts up gaudier numbers, but I think he's more dependent on that run game working, because Jalen Hurts is a part of Philadelphia's run game. He is a factor in the run game, whereas Jared Goff isn't. If defenses are able to take away Detroit's run game, I don't know if Jared Goff's going to be able to burn them for it necessarily, but I think Jalen Hurts can in a way. But home field advantage is always going to matter in this question, because Jared Goff is involved in this question, and we've seen him struggle in cold weather. If they have to play outside in Philadelphia, I think that will be an issue for him. If they're playing indoors in Detroit, I don't think it's going to be an issue. But I honestly think it might come down to the whistle, how refs call the man coverage Detroit plays, because we know they're going to play physical. We know how big of a deal that is against those two Philadelphia receivers. You have to be able to play man coverage on the outside and hold up against AJ Brown and Devontae Smith when he gets back. And we know Detroit's going to try to do that. Aaron Glenn loves to play man coverage. And if they can get away with holding a little bit, like teams are wont to do in the playoffs, and the refs usually swallow the whistle in the playoffs, then I think it could be a good matchup for Detroit. But if it is outside, I'm going the other way, and I'm picking Philadelphia blind.
It really is. I mean, this of all the years when we look at home field and you're like, does it matter? Does it not matter? This year in the NFC, it might matter more than any time in the last decade. I don't know. I'm saying that off the top of my head, but you're absolutely right. I mean, Jared Goff has been a different guy in the elements, and when they're indoors, nobody has stopped them. I mean, they win, they cover. If you're betting on them every time they're indoors, you're winning a lot of money. And even if you think the Eagles defense is pretty good, that Lions offensive line has just been, it's the two best offensive lines in the NFL. So it's so funny as we're talking about this. It's the two maybe best teams in the NFC, offensive line, running the football. Old school. Diante, I mean, you got to have a big smile on your face. Loving this. Old school.
This is my kind of ball, man. This is how it's supposed to look. This is how it's supposed to look going into holiday season. We're talking about the teams that win at the line of scrimmage with the run game, play physical and coverage, and force your quarterback to earn it by, dealing with pressure and having to play through a lot of tight coverage and in high leverage situations. This is winning football.
As the great Marty Morningweg used to always say when I was a young Buck reporter, everything in the NFL is cyclic. Cyclic. And here you go. Run the ball. Make sure your offensive line is buttoned up, and you will have a chance when the weather gets cold. All right, take a break. We come back. We'll see what lessons Diante and Ruiz learned from Week 12. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. Diante, what do you got? What did you learn in week 12?
I learned that Mike Macdonald is still just as good a game planning coach as a head coach as he was as Baltimore's defensive coordinator over not just today, but over the last few weeks. Like, if you look at how they were able to win at the line of scrimmage, not just in terms of getting the sacks on Kyler, I think that some of that is just kind of like variance. I think that there were things that might have been that we'll look back on film and say, oh, these things might have been available, or, guys just losing one-on-one up front. Leonard Williams probably had one of the most productive games of his career today. And that was definitely an unexpected piece of it. But what I think when you look at not necessarily the results of those plays, those big splash plays, but what they're doing on a down-to-down basis, to see Arizona have their season low in rushing success rate against the Seattle front that we have not had many nice things to say in terms of stopping the run. I think that speaks to just their growth over the season. And then you think a few weeks ago when they played the Rams, even though that game went into overtime and we got to see some of those Stafford trick shots, that was the third lowest passing success rate of the season for the Rams in that game. And so much of this, I think, is just the implementation of a different scheme, right? And I think that it just takes some time, like that onboarding process of, hey, we're going to give up some plays time to time, but we're not going to give up many explosives. And sometimes you've got to deal with early in the season, things may be going wrong. And I think that now that you've seen them kind of build up a comfort level and an understanding of who they are, you're starting to see that success really start to shine through. Even though, the metrics don't necessarily suggest that you're looking at a top 10 defense, right? They're about middle of the pack in passing success rate and explosive play allowed, and the same for the run game. But the one thing that they do take away are those deep passes. And that's been what Arizona has been running defenses off the field with, is running the ball well enough to make you honor it and load up the box, and then taking big time shots down the field. And I think outside of like some very high degree of difficulty throws to Trey McBride, obviously you have the throw over the shoulder to Michael Wilson that put them within the 10-yard line. That was one of Kyler's best throws of the year. You take those plays off the table, there really wasn't much else there for Arizona in the passing game, which is why the pass rush was able to get home. And I think that all of this speaks really well to who Mike Macdonald is. And it's funny that this game happened coming off of our preview show where we were discussing which of these teams you trust most. And I think all of us said in a one-game sample, Mike Macdonald is about as good as you can ask for. And that's exactly what we saw on Sunday.
Yeah, he's helped turn around this run game completely, which I think is just made everything else easier, especially on passing downs. Like if you look at the pass down numbers, they haven't really changed over the course of the year. The big change over the last couple of weeks has been that first down run defense. And like, maybe it's just coincidental that they made the move at the deadline. They trade for Ernest Jones. They get rid of Jerome Baker. They get rid of Tyrell Dotson. They replaced their linebacker core in the middle of the season. And they have a top 10 run defense since then. Ernest Jones hasn't missed a tackle in 4 games, according to Pro Football Focus. I don't know if we could put it all on him. The defensive line has also gotten healthy. I think Mike Macdonald, like Diante said, has figured some things out. And we saw a similar first half, second half split with Baltimore during Mike Macdonald's first year. It took a little while to get that defense up and running. And if Seattle gets that similar boost over the second half and this run defense stays good and Mike Macdonald can do all of his tricks on third down, which we know put quarterbacks in hell, like even the best quarterbacks, like Kyler Murray has been playing the best football of his career, and he looked helpless out there at times. And like Diante said, 15% success rate for Arizona on the ground, 1 explosive run play, and that was a 13-yard run on 3rd and 18. It shouldn't even count. So they did, and Arizona came into the league with the highest explosive run rate. They came in to the game 5th in success rate, and Seattle just decimated them in the ways that they've been thriving all season long. So yeah, I'm with Diante here, and I have to give myself an L because like 3 weeks ago I was saying, Mike Macdonald, show me something. If you're this great defensive game planner, this great defensive mind, show me something. And since then he has, and he shut me up.
He's got his fastball back. I mean, that, like you said, that Cardinals offense was top 10 in pretty much any metric you want to look at. They didn't score a touchdown today. 10 offensive possessions, and they don't score a touchdown. And this is the stretch run NFC West game. It's a big spot. You know what moment I loved was that big 4th and 1, and the Cardinals are going for it. And McDonald calls the timeout, but like they don't see it until after the ball snapped. And I think it's an incompletion. And some players like, no, why'd you call timeout? But they whistled the timeout. They come back. And they were ready for, I think, what the Cardinals were calling there. I mean, Devon Witherspoon with a fantastic play, realizes Kyler Murray's rolling out to the right, chases him with like unbelievable acceleration and explosion. Kyler Murray realizes I can't turn the corner and run for this. I got to throw it. He throws it, makes a bad throw. Kobe Bryant with the pick six there and returns it. And I like seeing Mike McDonald kind of come out of his shell on the sideline too. I mean, that dude was pumped today, not only at that moment, but throughout this game. Like, my guys are, it's working. Cause I'm sure as a coach, you're kind of like, all right, I think I can do this, but I'm sure there's paranoia. Like, is this going to work this year? Is it going to wait till next year? Like you guys said, how long is it going to take? And then you have injuries. So getting healthier, he's finding his fastball. And all of a sudden this team that 2 weeks ago was like, they're probably the team least likely to get to the playoffs in the NFC West. They've won 2 in a row and now they're right there. I mean, I would say defensively, I trust them more. I'm making sure I believe this before I say it. Yeah, I trust them more than any other team in the division right now. Defensively, sure. You guys agree, right?
Yeah,
1000%.
I feel like we've seen holes in the other defenses. I think the only defense that has an argument is Arizona, and obviously when those two were on the field together, Seattle looked much better on the defensive end. And I still think this offense has a lot of room to grow. Like, this offense could be so much better than it has been. Just figure out that protection. I know that's been an issue, like going back to the Russell Wilson era. But if they could just figure something out, Geno is playing at such a high level. And we saw him make clutch plays. I know he had the interception. He had some tough throws out there today in the rain. But when it comes down to it, he's making clutch plays and making difficult plays in the clutch. We saw it against the San Francisco 49ers last week. We saw it against Arizona today to close out the game. He's playing at a high level. They have one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. They have one of the better defenses over the last month. Like, that's usually a recipe for success. And they're up to the 3 seed in the NFC. It's not even like they're just like in the playoffs right now. Wow. They have the 3 seed.
That's crazy. I didn't realize that. See, we'll circle back on all the standings throughout the show. Yeah, I'm with you. It's just like that has to be number 1 on the priority list now. It's just like, because it always feels like they're a negative play around the corner because of the offensive line. And you even saw that today, just when you start to feel good, when it's going good, you're like, this is one of the best teams in the NFC. And then they just have these spurts where like, they can't block anybody. Every run is, Kenneth Walker. Oh, he just lost 6 yards on that. And they were in field goal range. Oh, Geno Smith. I mean, he got sacked, 4 times on 3rd down today. And it's just like, how do you get those plays out of there somehow with this offensive line, Diante? If they could do that, I mean, they really could be an interesting sort of wild card team in the NFC.
I mean, it speaks to just how dangerous they are, right? Like, before Steven brought up that point, that was going to be kind of what I was going to close the conversation with, is that Geno is still about 15th in total EPA on throws, despite having lost the most EPA on interceptions and being in the top 10 in EPA lost on sacks. Some of that is Geno being ambitious. I think that there are a lot of times where I'm watching Seattle's offense and it feels like I'm watching Dak Prescott. Not necessarily this year, but in years past with Dallas, where it's like so many of these situations is Geno trying to extend or trying to work the ball into a tight window in a high leverage situation because that's all that's really available. And when they're not rolling on early downs, you can really feel just how much pressure is on him as a passer. But I think that this team, because the defense has been better, because they've done a little bit better job of being able to get explosive plays, when they have DK in the lineup, and now the Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think, is kind of breaking out as a legitimate number 2 wide receiver in this offense. I think that you're seeing the margin of error is not necessarily as tight for them right now as it was maybe 3-4 weeks ago when it looked like they were maybe kind of losing their grip on the season. I think that this is one of those teams that you should be looking at saying whether, if we've got to travel to them early in the year, late in the year, this is not going to be an easy game for anybody. And you've seen it in how they've handled these divisional games of late. They were right there with Los Angeles, and then you come back and you beat San Francisco, and then you really put a clamp on Arizona's offense. This is exactly what we needed to see to be able to believe in who they are right now.
We've kind of forgotten about it over the last couple of years, but like, Seattle's a terrible place to play. And to have to play there in January, it's going to be a tough assignment for anyone. And like, even with like the margin for error that Geno has and the fact that he's been throwing interceptions, I think he has 11 interceptions on the year. He only has 11 turnover-worthy plays, according to Pro Football Focus. He's tied with Patrick Mahomes for the 11th best turnover-worthy play rate in the NFL. So, like, he is making the most out of a crappy situation that I think a lot of other quarterbacks might buckle under. But I mean, we're seeing him buckle at times, but he's saving his best play for when it matters, and he's helping them win games at the moment. Like, as long as you have this good quarterback who makes the right plays down the stretch, and then you have a good defense, it usually leads to win. Like we're seeing the Chiefs use that formula this year. They used it last year to win the Super Bowl. Obviously, Seattle's not on that level. Geno Smith's not on Patrick Mahomes' level. The defense isn't on Kansas City's level. Actually, it's probably better than Kansas City's defense, but we'll get into that later. But it's a winning formula, and I think they match up well with a team like Detroit. Like we've seen them play Detroit good over the last couple of years. I know they got, their defense got torn up by Detroit earlier in the year, but it looks
they
better
were hurt
now.
like hell in that game too.
Yeah,
they were
and
missing
their
like
offense
their
had 38 first downs against the Lions defense that now is looking like a lot better. So,
and the pass rush hasn't got better in Detroit.
Competitive game,
at least based on personnel.
Yeah. That's interesting. The Geno, I didn't really realize that about Geno's turnover worthy play. So that would suggest that he's getting a little bit unlucky in that when he makes a mistake, it's a high leverage. This is sort of killing your team type mistake, but it doesn't necessarily mean he's making more mistakes than the average quarterback. So whether that turns in the course of a season or not, who knows? Yeah, go ahead.
He has 11 turnover worthy plays and 11 interceptions.
Right. Now, not all of those might not be turnover worthy. He might have others that were dropped, but there might be ones that were interceptions that bounce off a player's hand or whatever. So that's that is interesting. Seahawks at 6-5 atop the NFC West, plus 2-point differential. Arizona Cardinals 6-5, plus 8-point differential. Los Angeles Rams 5-5, minus 26-point differential. And I don't think I realized this until just now. 49ers are 5-6 and are dead even on the season in point differential. So a lot to be determined. We're going to talk about a couple more of those teams here coming up. Let's take a break. We come back. We get to Ruiz's lesson from week 12. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. Ruiz, what did you learn in week 12?
Okay, my lesson comes from the 49ers-Packers game. The Packers win this game 38-10. But I want to reference our first conversation when we talked about the Lions and Eagles and which team we trust more. My answer to that question would actually be the Packers, and the reason why is this is the only team that I think has been able to show a high level of play in the run game and also a high level of play in the passing game where it's kind of separate. Like I think Jordan Love has become one of the better drop back passers in the game. You still see those errant throws. You still see the odd mistake, but his ambition as a passer, we keep throwing them around that word this season, is just remarkable to me. And we're seeing him, it's almost like a better version of the Anthony Richardson approach where like, we're not throwing a lot of passes. We're not completing a lot of passes actually, but every pass we throw, we're getting a tremendous bang for our buck. And I think the more they play, I still don't think we've seen the best of this team yet and the best of this offense yet and the best of Jordan Love yet. He hasn't been healthy all year. He hasn't been able to put together multiple healthy games in a row. And I think over the past couple of weeks, we've seen signs of that quarterback we saw over the second half of last year with a little bit of more improvement, with a little more confidence and I think he has more clout in the offense. I think Matt LaFleur trusts him a little more. Like even when Jordan Love was throwing the interceptions a couple of weeks ago, Matt LaFleur was asked about it and he was like, I can't blame him because he's making the right decisions. Like he's aggressive, but it's in appropriate situations to be aggressive. And I think as he continues to calibrate that, when we get into December, I don't think there's going to be a question about who the best quarterback in the NFC is, or in the NFC playoff field, I should say, because I think there are some quarterbacks who might fall outside the playoffs that are better than Jordan Love at this point. But I think he will be the quarterback who's playing his best ball in January in the NFC. I still think that run game's going to be good. And the defense, I know they went up against a banged up 49ers team that was missing Brock Purdy and Brandon Allen was playing with a broken finger on his left hand. I don't know why that was a better option than Josh Dobbs, which made things super easy on Jeff Hackley in that defense. But the defense is good enough. I don't know if it's like a Super Bowl winning defense, but I think it's good enough to get this team to be competitive if Jordan Love is playing his best ball.
Yeah. I think I'm with you. I wrote down like for my Packers notes, I'm like 8-3 and it still feels like they haven't played their best. So I'm totally on the same page with you. Even watching that game, you're looking at it and it's like they're in control of that game the entire time. But I wasn't like, I still feel like there's another level to them. they are the most run heavy team in the NFL. We talked about the Lions and the Eagles being run heavy. You know, no one is running the football more on early downs than the Packers. And that was clearly their game plan today, where they're just like, we are going to bully you up front. You don't have the guys. And they were pretty much right about that. And then, like you said, when Jordan Love throws the football, he's connecting downfield. Christian Watson had to drop today, or his numbers are going to be a lot better, where the box score isn't that impressive. So yeah, I've been a Jordan Love guy for a while. It's interesting to see how the you know, like Jalen Hurts, it's like, don't make mistakes. Jared Goff, it's like, let the scheme work for you. And Jordan Love, it's like his highlight package is going to look the best, of any of those guys. So it's hard for me. Now, I do have more, still have questions about their defense. I don't know when I'm going to be at the point where I feel like they're answered. We've talked about it before. They're getting a lot of their production on turnovers. If you look at success rate, I still think they're bottom 10 in the NFL. And so when I look at kind of these teams in the NFC and how they match up with one another, like if they've got to play the Lions or the Eagles, are they just going to get run all over? I mean, I think there's potential for that. Now they might be able to run, they might be able to score and keep up in one of those games. I think the Lions and the Eagles have more ways to win with their defense right now than the Packers do. I trust them more than the Packers, but I think the Packers' offensive ceiling is right there with anyone in the NFC. Diante, what do you think?
I'm with you. It's actually fun. I think I've kind of reversed course since Jordan Love has come back week by week. I think early in his return, I was like, all right, some of these ambitious throws that are going sideways, I would like you to maybe reel it in a little bit more. I think that what I've actually seen is maybe Matt LaFleur has just decided to embrace it. And you see them trying to push the ball further and further instead of trying to rein the drop back passing game in. And I think that it's paid off for the most part. You mentioned the Christian Watson drop. I mean, the margin of this game could have been a lot worse if they were able to connect on some of their earlier passing plays in the first half. And the fact that they can rely on Josh Jacobs when he's there to really just be a hammer behind that offensive line, it does kind of protect them. It gives them a good baseline to allow Jordan Love to be able to take those chances and not feel like it has to be all or nothing. That's something that we talked about a lot with Anthony Richardson, right? Is that so often you look at the Colts and they are in 2nd and 11, or they're in 2nd and 7, or you're in a 3rd and 8, and now that guy's got to be Superman, and he has not shown that he's equipped to work through defenses that way. I do think that when Jordan Love is clicking, he can actually diagnose defenses and stay aggressive in a way that very few can for guys who want to push the ball downfield as often as he does. And I think that he's surrounded with the right kind of playmaking talent and a coach that is really going to enable him and kind of empower him to take those chances every time they're available. So I probably shouldn't be surprised that they were able to put this game away so quickly. And even if I do have questions about this defense, and I'm with you, Sheil, and me not totally being a believer in what they are and what they'll look like against contenders this year, I do think that Jordan Love just might be good enough to where it only matters but so much.
Yeah, he's one of the few quarterbacks that doesn't let the defense dictate how aggressive he is. Like even like a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes has let that happen. He's one of the lowest quarterbacks in ADOT. He has one of the lowest ADOT, I should say, in the NFL right now. It doesn't matter how you defend Jordan Love. He's pushing it downfield. He had a 12 ADOT today against the against the 49ers. But my pushback against the Lions point and how the defense matches up against the Lions and the Eagles, we've seen them play those offenses. They played Detroit in week 9 and they gave up 4.7 yards per play. They gave up 0.04 EPA per play, which is positive for Detroit, but it's not a Detroit game that we're used to when they're ringing up 50 points a game. So they've competed with both of these offenses that they've gone up against. Now, the Philadelphia game was in week 1 in Brazil. I don't think that game really tells us much about either team's ceiling or how they're going to play in January. But 3 weeks ago, we did see them be competitive against the best offense in the NFL, and maybe the best offense that we've seen in a couple decades. And the good news is we get a rematch between the two. So we'll have a lot more information going into the postseason. I think it will be easier to answer the question, which team in the NFC do we trust most?
Yeah, they're 8-3. So they've got Vikings are still right there, 9-2. And the Lions, of course, are 10-1. So right now it's looking like the Packers would be looking at a wild card spot unless they can jump both those teams. But like you mentioned, they still have an opportunity to face the Lions there. So yeah, they're going to be there. There's no doubt about it. They're going to be a very fun team once we get to playoff time. All right, we take a break, we come back, and we are debuting a new game for the Ringer NFL show in week 12. We'll do that in a second. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. A little game this week called Cook, Contender, or Playoff Pretender. The idea is simple. We are focusing on teams that lost today, and we're trying to gauge a little bit about where are we with each of them. Are we panicking? Is it over? So cooked means it's over. See you next year. Not your year. You're not making the playoffs. Contender means, all right, you might have lost today, but we can still see you playing on championship weekend, which if you're playing in championship weekend, it means you obviously have a chance to win the Super Bowl. Playoff pretender, that's in between. Like, all right, you still got a shot to get into the tournament. Maybe you're like the Saturday afternoon game or something like that, but we're not really taking you seriously as a contender. So we've got 3 teams we've got to talk about, see what level of panic their fan bases should be after what transpired in week 12. And the first team is a team we've talked a lot about this year, and that is the San Francisco 49ers. They lose 38-10 to the Green Bay Packers. No Brock Purdy, no Trent Williams, no Nick Bosa, no Charvarius Ward. They have 11 first downs in this game. That's the fewest in any game under Kyle Shanahan since he became the 49ers head coach. Ruiz, let's start with you. What do you got? Cooked, contender, or playoff pretender for the San Francisco 49ers, and why?
I'm not quitting this team. I'm sorry. I know how bad it looked. They're only 1 game back of first place in the NFC West. There's a very good chance this team makes the playoffs. I know that some playoff models have them at only 11%, at 15% to make the playoffs, but Seattle's schedule is tough down the stretch. They still have tough games. They play the Packers, they play the Vikings, they play the Rams, who I think, the record isn't great, but I do think they're going to be a competitive team. And they play at Arizona. So there's a chance that Seattle loses a few games. I think Arizona has shown some weak points, especially on Sunday against Seattle. And I still want to see this team and this offense healthy again before I'm willing to say they're cooked. I still think if we get those 5 Avengers back, I know we're not getting Ayuk, but if you throw Purdy in there, I guess for one day I'll allow him membership in the Avengers, the 49ers Avengers. But if you get all those guys back, I still think this offense has a high ceiling. We saw even during this hell year, they're like top 10 in a bunch of offensive metrics coming into this game. I know today was ugly, but it was expected to be ugly. And I know the schedule is daunting, but every team in the NFC West has a daunting schedule down the stretch. And if I had to bet my life on one of these teams winning a playoff game in the playoffs, it would still be the 49ers.
So that's contender for you, not
I'm
just
going
playoff
contender
pretender.
because if they do hit their stride come January, I think they have a chance to go on a run. I think every team in the NFC has weak points, has exploitable weak points. I don't trust the defense, but if Nick Bosa is out there, the defense always has a chance to put up a good game.
I hate to agree with you, Ruiz, but I can't quit him either. I can't quit him. Listen, you get to the Super Bowl, you earn a little bit of, credibility, where until I really need to just say, see you next year, I'm not going to do it quite yet. And Diante gave us all the numbers on the Friday show that they're still operating like a top 8, top 10 offense. When you look at it now, obviously the big concern is, are you getting healthy? You are going to Buffalo next week. You have it. Who is lining up? Who is on the field against Josh Allen in Buffalo in week 13? But I'm with you. They're 1 game out. They're 5-6. No one's run away with the division. They don't need to necessarily win the division. If you get a wild card spot, I have them as contender because I think if they actually do get in, they're going to be dangerous. Like, to me, there's no playoff pretender with them. They're not going to be who cares? The Niners are in the playoffs. No, if they get in, this is a dangerous team that can make a run. The odds, you said good chance to make the playoffs. The odds would say they do not. I know you mentioned that, but even the FanDuel odds, the betting markets, any statistical model you look at would say it is, way over 50% that they do not make the playoffs. That was the case going into this weekend, and then they lost this weekend. I'm looking at FanDuel's odds right now. They are 4th. They have the worst odds of any NFC West team to win the division at plus 600, which I think is kind of nuts right now. All right, Diante, are you putting us in our place, or is this a clean sweep and we're all brainwashed by Kyle Shanahan?
This is not a clean sweep. They're a pretender to me. And I would say not only are they a pretender, they're closer to cooked than they are a contender. I think that, and I think it's okay. I think it's okay to say that the story of this season and what it may ultimately be by the time we get to the end of it is that they were a team that was so close. I don't think that this is a Super Bowl hangover year where it just seems like a team's letting go of the rope. I think obviously today was pretty circumstantial. You don't have your quarterback. The quarterback who you are playing only has use of 9 of his 10 digits, and you could clearly tell that he was struggling to handle the ball early in the game. And then the turnovers in the second half basically sealed it for Green Bay. But when you look at what this team was designed to be, and I noted this on last Friday when I was writing about the 49ers offense and what's been wrong with it, the issue was not trying to create some argument that it's been bad. You can't, by any metric or on a down-and-down basis, there's no argument that this offense is bad. In fact, this is still a top 6 to top 8 offense in just about any metric you look at, this Sunday notwithstanding. The issue is that this team was not built to contend for a Super Bowl with the top 6 to 8 offense. This team was built to contend for the Super Bowl with the number 1 offense. That's what it was built to do, is to have its entire complement of weaponry on the outside, to have Brandon Ayuk as a guy that can go win one-on-one passes. We saw how difficult this offense looked when Brock Purdy and Brandon Ayuk were not able to connect deep down the field in a way that they had been prior, and that was before he got hurt. We're seeing Deebo Samuel really kind of be relegated to just like a drag route and dump off guy and just getting like cheap yards after the catch. And I think that's always been a piece of his game. But the fact that defenses now are really able to take him away in the intermediate area has become an issue for this team. And then you look at the return of Christian McCaffrey, and I think that I will speak for myself, and I'm sure that this is reflected in a lot of 49ers fans. There was a thought that that would add into your yards after the catch ability in the passing game, and that you would be a better early down running team once he got back. And neither of the two have happened. We didn't get a chance to really get a legitimate evaluation this week. If they have Brock Purdy, maybe we get a clearer look against a defense that's going to be contending for a title this year and whether or not they were going to be able to find any kind of rhythm. But this team's offensive line is just getting moved off the ball snap after snap. And because of that, you're in these difficult situations to where you can't even maximize the value of Christian McCaffrey coming out of the backfield or Deebo Samuel getting yards after the catch because you've got so much ground to make up. And now you're asking Brock Purdy, when he's out there, to be a quarterback that we just haven't seen him demonstrate the ability to be on a week-to-week basis, which is a ceiling raiser. And I think it's okay. I think it's fine. As a matter of fact, I would say that I trust them in just about every game to be competitive outside of this one against the Bills that's coming up next Sunday and then late in December against the Lions. I think that you can make a credible argument that they can win the rest of their 6 games that are left on the schedule. I just don't know if any of that matters when you're dealing with the team that is not operating at this level it needs to offensively and certainly defensively to make another run at a Super Bowl.
Yeah, their defense without Nick Bosa. I mean, I guess it's not just Nick Bosa. They haven't had Javon Hargrave. They don't have Charvarius Ward. Like, these are 3 of their best players aside from Fred Warner on defense. You've got a new defensive coordinator. Your special teams suck. I mean, watching Kyle Shanahan today, I'm just like, is my guy gonna survive this season? Is he just like, I don't know. Someone might need to be like, you just need to take a break. Like, come back. We'll see you, at the combine or in the spring, because
he somehow
Go ahead.
He somehow passed Mike Shanahan in age. So he caught up to Mike Shanahan somewhere along the line. He's the senior of the family now. Like, he looks like he's aged 10 years in the last month.
Yeah, he really does. They had those, I think, back-to-back 12 men on the field penalties where I was like, just make sure, like, someone keep an eye on this guy. It's like anything is possible with him right now. And yeah, now going to Buffalo and facing Josh Allen is not going to help that. All right. So Diante's got playoff pretender. Ruiz and we can't give up on him. We're still saying contender. We'll see
Week
where
16.
we are.
That's when I'll quit them.
Okay.
That game against the Dolphins. If they don't beat the Dolphins in that week, I'm assuming they're going to beat the Bears 2 weeks from now. I'm assuming they're going to beat the Rams at home. That Dolphins game is the first real test after this Bills game, which I'm chalking up as an L right now, whether Purdy's playing or not. But that will be either the death or the rebirth of this team.
Yeah, let's see who's on the field next week, the week after. I mean, that really is a big aspect of it. What kind of team are they able to put out there? All right, take a break. We come back. We get to our next team. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. Team number 2. What is it? Cooked, contender, playoff pretender. I'll get it at some point. I mean, maybe 3 weeks from now, if we do this again at some point, I'll get it. All right, the next team is the Washington Commanders. 10.5-point favorites at home. They lose to the Cowboys and Cooper Rush, 34-26. Their third straight loss. Diante, where are you with the Washington Commanders?
They were pretenders before this week, and I really just think that this just stamped the fact that they're pretenders and that this season is basically playing out how every Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury season plays out, where they get all the high variance plays to go in their favor early in the year. You get your quarterback to kind of raise the level of the scheme around them, especially in the passing game. And then as defenses start to adjust and they play tighter to routes and take away some of the easy buttons, you're starting to see just how little is actually built into this thing to help, their quarterback get through progressions quickly and efficiently. And then I think just today was a day of just kind of like the wheels coming off for this defense. There's really no excuse for Cooper Rush to look as good as he did. The special teams were bad. I'm sure we can get into all of the ending of this game in detail for Washington. And this was against a Dallas team that was also not that great on special teams today either. But I just think that things are kind of falling apart, so to speak, on schedule. I think that all of the flaws that we've seen in this team, or we've been trying to identify in this team from the beginning of the season, are starting to come home to roost. And it doesn't mean that this is a bad year. I think I've said this in the power rankings. I've said it on the podcast. Once they got to about 6-7 wins, I think everything else for this season was gravy for them, judging up against their preseason expectations. But this is clearly a pretender in this context.
So you can still see them making the playoffs, though.
I think that they'll make the playoffs. I think they banked enough early season wins, and they've got the Titans, they've got the Saints, they're going to see the Cowboys again. They've got Atlanta. So I think that 4 of the next 5 games for them, they should feel like they can at least compete in, if not win outright.
I mean, what do you think, Ruiz?
Yeah, we would have said that against the Cowboys when they were favored by 10.5 points, and they looked
fair. That's
really
fair.
bad. Like, the game ended up being close, and you could argue like the kicker lost them the game with the missed extra point, but the game shouldn't have been that competitive to begin with. Like, Dallas gave them every chance in that game to get back into it. And honestly, I feel like the kicker is kind of getting a bad rap. Like, the only reason they were even close in that game is because he hit a 51-yard field goal. For some reason, Washington took it on second down. Did you guys see this? Like,
no.
The drive before they tied the game.
I don't think I realized it was on second down.
No, they spiked the ball on first down with I think it was 1:48 left. They're down by 10 points, and they take the field goal on second down, a 51-yard field goal too. The kicker had missed an extra point, and you're relying on him to make a 51-yard field goal to cut it to 7. And then it almost worked out because the Cowboys went 3 and out, and then they forgot how to tackle on the Terry McLaurin 86-yard touchdown.
Oh, right, because they needed the field goal and the touchdown. So they said, get the field. Okay, yeah,
but points early. Yeah.
Normally you do that when you're a little closer, not at 51 yards.
Yeah, and when there's like 30 seconds left, not 2 minutes left. It was an insane decision, but it ended up working out, I guess. But then obviously they missed the extra point. But I think the schedule is a little harder than Diante is letting on here. Like, the Titans, they should be able to beat the Titans next week, but the Titans just upset the Texans in Houston. Then they play a Saints team that has played better since the coaching change. I don't know how sustainable that is, but the offense looks a little better. The defense looks a little better. And then Philadelphia, Atlanta, and then this Cowboys team on the road that just beat them. There's a chance they can miss the playoffs. My pick is pretender, and this team is a Hail Mary and a 4th down conversion in Cincinnati away from having a losing record right now. But like Diante said, we shouldn't lose sight of what this team's expectations were before the season and what the barometer for success was. And we're seeing that. Like, Jaden Daniels struggled once again, but down the stretch, he played really well. Like,
played
he helped
really well
them
in the
come
fourth
back.
quarter.
Yeah, a lot of good drives, like 3 good drives in the fourth quarter. So I'm still optimistic about him. I haven't been optimistic about the longevity of Kingsbury's offense. So I'm not terribly surprised that it's kind of fallen apart when they started to fall apart on first down. But this isn't the season that I think they envisioned after 2 months.
Yeah, they sort of look like the team that it was like, best case, like going into the season, you looked at the offensive line and the pass catchers and Cliff Kingsbury, and I was like, Jaden Daniels is not going to have a good rookie season. It's not going to happen for them. They're going to be one of the worst offenses in the NFL. And I think a lot of that stuff is just catching up to them. I mean, the offensive line issues, certainly a couple of weeks ago against the Eagles, and even you saw that in this game today. the pass catchers when Terry McLaurin is lining up at left wide receiver on 80% of the snaps, and the defense knows exactly where he's going to be on every pass play. And it's like, you're the only team that is still, why are you still doing this? Did you not learn from when you were last in the NFL? How is this still happening here? And then you look at who else is he going to throw to, and then the Daniels, and I'm a big Jaden Daniels fan, but the frame, and then you wonder the injuries, that the hits he's taken throughout the course of the season, because his accuracy is not maybe what it was the first 4, 6, 8 weeks of the season. And then there's Cliff Kingsbury. He's getting the questions in the press conferences that your teams fall apart in the second half of the season. Well, can you be more specific? So all these things are adding up, and they've lost 3 in a row. And right now they would be the last team in at 7-5, but the Cardinals are behind them 6-5. The Bucks are 5-6. The Rams are 5-6. The Niners are 5-6. And then Ruiz mentioned the Saints. Maybe there will be other teams in there. So they're in a good spot where you would think, all right, if you can kind of, revert to being some version of the team we saw earlier this season, you've still got a great chance to get in here. And their odds to make the playoffs are -188. So the, betting markets say they should get in, but I just don't know what kind of team this is going to be down the stretch. Like you said, you lose. The final score here is not indicative of how they played. The final box score of 412 yards is not indicative of how they played. They were down 20-9 with 5 minutes left against what's been mostly a, lifeless Cowboys defense and a lifeless Cowboys team this entire season. And then you get the 86-yarder to Terry McLaurin. But again, those are high leverage plays that you can't count on every week. All right. Hopefully, I enjoyed that. What do we think? Thumbs up? It's fun to say. You guys should try saying it. You don't have to say it on air, but when you're just hanging out at home later, it's fun to say cooked, contender, playoff pretend. Like you can do a little chant, Diante, do it with your son or something. It's pretty fun. It's pretty fun to say. All right, I think it was a success. Maybe we'll bring it back in future weeks. There's a lot of these teams we got to talk about. Where do we take them seriously or not? So that will be a lot of fun. To everyone watching on FanDuel TV, thank you. Appreciate you watching there. For more, check us out on Spotify or at Ringer NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast.